Good morning, everyone. Good morning and Happy New Year. I think I can still say that. It's the first time I've been in the pulpit in the new year, so Happy New Year to everybody here in the sanctuary and those who are joining us today on Zoom. If you are joining us today for the first time, we are glad that you are here, and we hope that after the service you will feel comfortable to join us for some coffee and refreshments in the Dorothy Memorial Hall where you entered. And today is kind of a special day. We have a guest speaker with us, Will Hurley from Needlepoint Sanctuary of Maine. Will, you just want to raise your hand a little bit and give people a quick wave? There we go. We'll introduce Will a little bit more later on. The content of our service later on is going to be talking about addiction and substance use disorder and harm reduction. And if this is something that you might find triggering or whatnot, we just want to give you a heads up that this is what we're going to be talking about. So you're aware of where we're going with that. So that's enough for me for the moment. I'm going to ask John to come up and offer some announcements for the benefit of our community. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Reverend Drew. Good morning. Good morning. There you go. So today, right after the service, let's see, at 11:30, right here in the sanctuary, the Spirit of Drumming group is going to be meeting. So if you're feeling rhythmically inclined, you do not even need to have your own drum. 11:30 today, Spirit of Drumming right here. And at the same time, Robin Wood is going to be up tower playing a concert on the chime, and we'll be collecting food donations out on the curb in the monthly Ringing Bells and Feeding Souls gathering. Next Sunday, after the service, there will be a chat with the minister immediately after the service here in the sanctuary. All comers are invited to ask questions, offer thoughts, and learn more about UUSB. Also next Sunday at 3 p.m. is an interfaith service in honor of Martin Luther King Jr., sponsored by Faith Linking in Action, Racial and Ethnic Experiences Through the Generations. That will be next Sunday, the 15th at 3 p.m. right here. For more information, contact us at faithlinkinginaction.org. And the day after, on Monday the 16th, the annual Martin Luther King Jr. Breakfast, co-sponsored by the Bangor NAACP and the University of Maine, will be held from 8 to 10 a.m. in the Wells Conference Center at UMaine. Reverend Drew is leading an entourage here. I don't know if you still have seats available, but Suzanne Kelly can let you know. So if you are interested in joining the UUSB delegation to the Monday, January 16th Martin Luther King Jr. Breakfast, please speak to Suzanne Kelly and Reverend Drew, who are organizing our representation at that event. Those are today's announcements. Welcome, enjoy.
Thanks, John. And I really want to hold up that interfaith service. There hasn't been an interfaith service, a Martin Luther King interfaith service, for a couple of years, and it's taken a couple of years of making some adjustments and talking with the congregations that were leading that before, and Faith Linking in Action jumping in, and it's going to be a very different service this year. A lot more welcoming and friendly and truly interfaith and less ecumenical. So it's going to be a great time. And they even talked me into doing a piece of music. Spirit, help me. So let us all now just take a couple of deep breaths. Come into this space in the sanctuary here, or the space in your home, a space that is warm, hopefully, and sacred. Find that comfortable place in your seat or reclining wherever you are, and know that each and every one of you are welcome here just as you are. I now invite Jack and Molly to bring our introit.
Thank you, Molly and Jack. That was beautiful. This morning, Kate Dutra is going to light our chalice while I share a reading, Risk to be Safe by Joe Cherry. When I was a kid and we played tag, there was always something called the safe tree. If you were touching this temporarily magical tree, are any trees temporarily magical? You could not be made it or tagged out. The challenge was getting to the tree, because surely it was guarded by the current person who was it, and whose goal it was to tag you, so you would be it, and they would no longer be that. To be close to the center, to the safe tree, meant you had to risk being vulnerable to the person who could tag you. You had to risk to be safe. If we think of the safe tree as the center of the game, the place of safety, we can come to realize that safety involves some risk and, like the tree, is only temporarily magical. We light this chalice, a central symbol of our faith, knowing that while the flame of our chalice is only temporary, our faith in its meaning is endless.
Invite you to join in singing our opening hymn, the Meditation on Breathing. And we're going to sing this through 3 times. Yeah. Okay. Please rise in body or in spirit. I'm going to invite our young people to come forward at this time for our time for all ages. And I want to hold up as they're coming here, we can see the wonderful rug that we have here, that there's been a lot of names and handprints and stuff that were added, I think, in December. So there's a lot of new names on here, which is so cool to see. Unicorn's Vacation. I like that. All right. Okay, so today, instead of a story, I'm going to see if you can help me with something. I've got a little thing that I've been thinking about, and I think that you could probably help me. All right? So you ready to help me? Feeling energetic? Maybe a little bit. Okay, so first of all, I've got a prop here. Now, I'm going to hold this up. What is this? What does this look like to you? Money, yeah, like a bill, right? Some sort of a bill, okay? So let's open it up and let's look at that. How much is this worth? 20 bucks. It's worth 20 bucks, okay. So it's got some value to it. How many people here would love to have 20 bucks? Yeah, that's kind of like, 20 buckaroos. Yeah.
Make it 1,000.
Well, let's. All I've got's to 20 today. All I've got's to 20 today. So what I need is 2 volunteers. Okay, I'll have you, and then let's have you. Okay? Yep. Okay. So we're going to do a little experiment. All right. First of all, let's share your name. What? Emma, okay, and Maggie. They're going to help us today. So Emma, I'm going to give you this bill, and I want you to crush it and smush it and make it the tightest wad that you possibly can. Can you do that for me? Yeah, go for it. Oh, you're doing a good job. As small as you possibly can. Crush it. All right, we'll find out. You done? I think you did a pretty good job there. Look how small that is. That's small. All right. So I'm going to pull this out, smooth it out, look at it. How much is this worth?
20 bucks.
It's still worth 20 bucks. Even it's got all the wrinkles and stuff in it. It's still worth 20 bucks. Interesting. So I'm going to have you wad this back up again. Yep. And I'm going to hand it over to your friend here. And I want you to drop that on the floor, and I want you to stomp all over it. Smush it. Crush it. Get as small as you possibly can. Okay. When you're done, why don't you hand it back over to me? Okay. And let's see here. You're asking the question that I was going to ask. How much is this worth?
20.
It's still worth $20. Even though it's dirty now and dusty? Yeah. Thank you. That's what I wanted to have you do. Now the reason that you can sit down, let's give them a little applause for their help. Just jumping right into it, okay? So the reason that I wanted to use this illustration is that one of the things in our faith is our first principle tells us that everybody matters, right? Everybody has worth, right? And it doesn't matter if you have times when you feel like you are being crushed or you're being stepped all over or whatnot. When you pick yourself up, you still are worth something, right? That worth does not disappear, right?
Still that age. You're still the same age.
Well, you're still the same age unless it happens to be your birthday, and that would be. But I digress.
But you're not worth
Right?
something though.
But
You can't be worth something. That is not showing who you truly are. If you're worth something, you're
Preach
just
it.
showing one thing.
Yeah.
You're not showing your whole form.
So
You're showing one separate thing.
I love it. I love it. Can I repeat that for people to hear? So he's saying that we are all worth way more than this, right? That this is just a manifestation or an idea of what worth is, but we are all worth way more than that, and that money is only one way of looking at worth, right?
Well, we're not worth
Right.
anything. We're worth our own selves.
We're worth our own selves, right? Right.
If we say I'm worth
Speak into this.
I'm worth that, or I'm worth that, you're not saying who you truly are.
Yeah, right. So we're worth a lot more. There's a lot more to us. We're worth a whole heck of a lot more than any kind of value or whatnot. And part of the work is getting to know each other. In the RE program, we talk about each person matters. And the adult version of the first principle, we talk about the inherent worth and dignity of each person, meaning that we are all born with worth and value that never goes away. And so that means that how do we treat other people when we're angry or frustrated with them?
I was just trying to say, think about the $20. Like, what happens if they would have ripped that $20 bill and and then you're gonna be arrested because it's illegal to ruin money.
I don't know that I've heard of anybody getting arrested for that, but I didn't know. I don't know if that's
I heard that
yeah.
if you actually ruin actual money or
Mhm.
burn it, you will get arrested.
Okay. Interesting. That might be something to look into. I don't know that. But I want to get back to the message here of, if we believe that everybody has value and worth and should be treated with dignity, what do you do when someone makes you angry and you're trying to argue with them?
You should walk away,
Mm-hmm.
and if they are bothering you, you should tell a bigger person than you.
Okay, so one thing you could do is walk.
And then they'll take care of
Yeah,
the bullying.
there you go. So that's so let me try to remember what she just said. She was saying one thing you could do is you could walk away, right? And you could always ask somebody who's bigger than you to maybe kind of moderate or talk to both of you and try to figure things out a little bit. And that's a way of treating people with worth and dignity. That's beautiful, beautiful example. Anybody else?
Walk away, take a breath.
Take a
Think
breath.
about what you're gonna do to it. You shouldn't be getting even though they're doing something bad to you and they're being mean, they still have rights.
Yeah, Sue. Okay.
Let's say it's
That's
school.
I'm going to stop.
They could get bullied from other bullies. They could get even worse punishments than that. You should stand up yourself, and instead of asking an adult first, stand up, tell them about what you're doing wrong, and and fight for yourself, fight for your rights, fight for your one dignity that the bully says you have.
Wow.
You have more dignity than ever. You have what you want.
Are people hearing some of this? This is really good. We've got a natural born preacher here. This is good. This is good. This is good. So basically, I'm going to try to summarize again. Maybe we should get the handheld mic at some point so we can hear this a little bit better. But basically, he's saying that you should stand up for yourself. So that's another way of dignity. You should stand up for your own rights, right? And you don't want the other person, and you also want to do it in a way that doesn't get the other person into trouble, right? You can stand up, but you don't have to treat them poorly.
They just don't understand really what to do, so they just give them detention and think about their punishment. They don't
So-
think about why they're doing it, or why do they want to do it, or if they're getting forced to. They
Okay.
only
Okay.
care about whether one dignity. They only
Okay,
think
so
about
so you're saying that sometimes parents, in trying to respond to situations like that, just punish people, and instead of thinking about how it's going to affect that person later on. And I like that. That's very, very thoughtful. So we have to be how you can help the other,
be a bully.
right?
Making him more angry until maybe when he grows up to be in college, he might become a criminal from all that anger.
Yeah,
built up.
yeah.
He might be bullying other kids because of the anger.
Yeah.
He could get expelled.
Right, exactly. So what you're saying there is you're worried about the other person if they're going to get expelled, or how, if they get punished, how that's going to affect the rest of their lives. And that's treating that other person and recognizing their worth and their dignity, and treating them with respect. So that's really good. There's a good example. And I'm gonna stop us there because we want to keep going, and that's another way that we can sometimes help each other with our dignity and worth, is a kind of recognizing when we give people a chance to talk. Yeah. So with all of that said, I want to thank again our volunteers. I want to thank, what's your name?
Cameron.
Cameron, I really want to thank you for your very insightful thoughts. And next time we'll make sure we have a microphone ready so people can hear you a little bit better, because I don't know that I was actually capturing everything that you said.
You can also tell a teacher to
so-
say,
We're gonna, thank you. Thank you. And you can continue this conversation maybe later on at coffee hour or something with me if you'd like.
No.
So with that, speaking of dignity, we are going to treat you with some dignity as we sing you, serenade you down to your spiritual exploration experiences today.
next time we do this,
Dear friends, please join me in the spirit of meditation and prayer. Spirit of life and love, we gather in this time, in this place, to remind ourselves of the importance of the events of our lives. Today, we hold those in our community who are infirm and people who have suffered great harm from heart attacks on football fields and many other ailments of aging and sickness and addictions. Spirit, we also hold in our hearts the great joys of celebrating so many birthdays this month, this particular week, it sounds like, and also hearing great, beautiful, strong voice of music singing in our hearts and here at our candles. Spirit, we are grateful for this community, a place where we can be ourselves, where we can be vulnerable, where we can bring our joys and sorrows and share them with one another, because we know that each life tells an important story. Each life holds a deep and abiding truth. By coming together in this time, in this place, we grow closer to each other and we grow closer to being one. Blessed be. Amen.
At this time, the morning offering will be collected. This month, half of our plate collections will be shared with the Hungarian Unitarian Church and Providence, its charity organization. Over the past year, Providence has directly responded to the needs of Ukrainian refugees fleeing across the border to Romania, as well as internally displaced people in Ukraine. Thank you.
That we receive this morning's offertory to benefit this congregation and the Unitarian Council of Hungary. Thank you.
An excerpt from Harm Reduction Wisdom by Temperance Rivera. I do weekly outreach on foot in the Tenderloin, providing safer use supplies to San Franciscans experiencing houselessness, in addition to anyone who asks for something. There was a time when a government employee in a position of power yelled at me from the other end of the block, "You're killing those people with that foil." I was alarmed to be spoken to in this way for supporting my community. Didn't he know we're funded by the Department of Health? I thought, if he has such an issue, why doesn't he take it up with them instead of yelling at me, a wage worker? Another time, a community member stopped dead in his tracks when he spotted me with the wagon and said, quite sarcastically and sneeringly, "Thank you. Thank you so much for killing our community and keeping people addicted to drugs." I always found it strange that people reacted with such vitriol when I myself was someone in recovery. I have an informed viewpoint, after all. Harm reduction has saved my life, transformed my life. Fill in the blank with a positive verb, and chances are that harm reduction has done it. I struggle a bit with this topic because harm reduction is so many things that it's actually difficult to put it on paper. People tend to think it's just clean needles or Narcan, the drug used to reverse opioid overdoses, or simply doing less of a thing. It is sure, some of these, absolutely, but harm reduction is really just a term that refers to a wide variety of practices and treatment modalities. Here are some descriptions of harm reduction from folks currently practicing various methods of harm reduction. Harm reduction means a much deeper, inclusive approach to self-care, which paves the way to holistic solutions for wellness and recovery in general. For me, harm reduction is a conscious effort in taking better care of myself. This includes decision-making, setting flexible goals, and adjusting to life's problems. I also, through engaging in harm reduction recovery programs, have changed my thinking about many values ingrained in me from my upbringing. Finally, HR redefines boundaries around the media propaganda. Harm reduction is empowering people to find a pathway that works best for them. In short, harm reduction is an act of love. Harm reduction is not enabling. There is a good book that touches upon this called Over the Influence. In a chapter titled Letter to Family and Friends, the authors discuss what it really means to enable someone's addictive behaviors and conclude that the only way you can really enable anyone's drug use is by actually supplying them with drugs and/or alcohol. Most people think of harm reduction simply as a stepping stone to full abstinence. Sure, that is the case for some people, but not for all. Some people have no desire to stop using their substance of choice, and that's okay, because it's their choice. We have to respect people's autonomy to make their own decisions. Blessed be.
It's not what you do, but more why you do it. It's not what you say, but more what you mean. It's not what you feel, but more how you show it. And a gift for a friend is all very well. To help all your friends is the dream of so many. To share in their joy is what you conceive. But when I feel the joy of God in my soul is when I say a prayer for a stranger. It's not who you help, but more why you help them. It's not who you help, nor if you pick the time. Just keep in mind that we are all just brothers, and the man on the street can be your friend. For the world can get smaller every day, and if we, the few, keep this in mind, don't look at your brother in anger. Just say a prayer for a stranger. Have you ever done for the sake of just doing? To know in your heart you've done your fair share, to do your deeds with the direction that only will know just what you've done. For the world can get smaller every day, and if we, the few, keep this in mind, don't look at your brother in anger. Just say a prayer for a stranger.
Thank you, John, for singing that powerful song by Josh White Jr., one of my favorite blues and folk artists, and for learning that song specifically for this service. Thank you. And sharing your gift, your many gifts of music. I'm going to move down onto the floor here. Someday they'll invent a chip that will automatically scroll down for me, and I won't even have to think about it. I go right to where I want it to be. Wouldn't that be cool? So, our fourth Unitarian Universalist principle calls us to the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Theologically, this is a principle that asks us and encourages us to examine and re-examine our assumptions, beliefs, and preconceived notions. This principle asks us to carefully examine and re-examine our assumptions through the use of science and evidence to either affirm or discard our understandings of ourselves, society, and the world that we live in. It is a principle that can help us be affirming to our current state of belief. It is also a principle that can help us consider new understandings. Today, our service is focused on looking at one of the greatest social and public health issues of our times, the pandemic of death and suffering brought on by the rise of substance use and addiction in our society. In Maine last year alone, we lost over 627 people directly to overdoses. And as a nation, the numbers are just breaking in the news headlines right now. Over 107,000 lives were lost last year nationally. This is way too many deaths. Way too many families and partners and friends whose value and worth have been lost to us as a society. The suffering caused by the loss of these people ripples, as Jim mentioned, throughout our society in ways that lead to more suffering and damage to our collective whole. For years, our country's efforts to reduce the spread of addiction has focused on creating a war on drugs, which shames, blames, punishes, and demonizes people who use drugs without really addressing the root cause of addiction. The result is that drug use continues to grow, our prisons are overflowing, and people in our society who are struggling cannot get the help or support they need to be able to manage and deal with situations that life has left them in. Instead, we have forced people to go underground, to hide their addictions, and to engage in even riskier behaviors. The overwhelming evidence is that the war on drugs approach has been a dismal failure. The suffering has not gone down, but grown exponentially. There are a few in our society, including our congregation, who have not experienced some sort of tragedy from a loss of a life or a friend to an overdose. Back during the beginning of the AIDS epidemic back in the 80s and 90s, people working with HIV/AIDS discovered that a lot of AIDS transmission came from people with AIDS sharing needles and having unprotected sex. From this idea of focusing AIDS intervention not on blame or shame or abstinence, or they focused on reducing the harm instead. Groups defied laws and embraced their own conscience and developed the concept of working with people where they were. They created needle exchange programs, distributed condoms and other supplies and information that it would allow people to be who they were and have access to the things that would allow them to make safer choices, the ability to make safer choices. From those efforts, the concept of harm reduction was born. Today, the use of harm reduction refers to policies and programs, practices that aim to minimize the negative health, social, and legal impacts associated with drug use, drug policies, and drug laws. It is grounded in the concept of justice and human rights. It focuses on positive change and working with people without judgment, coercion, discrimination, or requiring that people stop using drugs as a precondition for support. Today, we are joined by Willie Hurley from Needle Point Sanctuary of Maine, which is a 501c3 community organization that is working directly with people in our community who are dealing with addiction and other issues related to substance use disorder in our community. So I want to welcome Willie. Willie, come forward. Let's give Willie a nice welcome.
Hey, everybody.
There you go.
Happy
Good.
to be here.
So Willie, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in doing harm reduction work.
Yeah, hi, everybody. My name is Willie Hurley. I used to live in Bangor. I now live in southern Maine. But I got involved in harm reduction through my own experiences with alcoholism and addiction. I come from a long family line of people who have struggled with alcoholism and drug addiction. When I was actually using, and especially in my early 20s, I actually wasn't really aware of harm reduction services that much. There's many times where I really could have benefited from them, experiences, health outcomes I had that could have been minimized. But when I first got into recovery, I became a recovery coach, and I was stationed at Health Equity Alliance, which is a local syringe exchange program it used to be on Pine Street, now it's on Hancock Street. And what I began to find working there is that I fell in love with harm reduction, and so harm reduction has literally saved my life in certain instances, whether during periods of relapse or past use. And then I guess it's also sort of literal, but more figuratively saved my life, because it was the first time in my life that I found myself useful to other people, really. That I found service work, which is the cornerstone, the foundation of my recovery, and pretty much anyone in recovery that you speak to, that's, the idea is that that's our cornerstone, is service and spirituality. And I was working at Health Equity Alliance, and at this time it was during we've been experiencing the so-called opiate crisis for many years now, and it continues to get worse every year. I no longer call it an opiate crisis. I think it's a crisis brought on by drug prohibition and by failed policies. It's a much larger side conversation that maybe we'll dig into a little bit. But I was working at Health Equity Alliance, and they are a wonderful organization. But at that time, they were what's called a certified organization. And you get certified through the CDC, and you have to abide by certain guidelines. Amongst them, that there's usually a cap on the amount of supplies that you can give to people. People have to sign all sorts of things. They need to come into the building. At that time, you'd have like the DEA posted up in like the parking lot. So a lot of people didn't feel comfortable coming in there, and me and some friends started doing street outreach. And at this time, it was in connection with a young man named Jesse Harvey and the Church of Safe Injection. And we eventually, what we ended up doing is basically creating our own syringe exchange program, and at a level that was really, really remarkable, and it was difficult to sustain in connection with a lot of the advocacy work and the, I was struggling with this word yesterday too. You call something the Church of Safe Injection, and it attracts a certain amount of attention from some people. And then, in these early days, actually, everything we did was illegal. We were doing intentional acts of civil disobedience. It was illegal for me to give somebody more than 10 syringes. It's called a hypodermic apparatus law. And as a result of this, we'd have detectives come down to us in Pickering Square, and they'd be like, okay, it's okay that you're giving out naloxone, which is the drug that reverses opiate overdoses, but you can't do the syringes. So we'd keep it pretty hush-hush until, coincidentally, during tourist season, the cops decided to start arresting us all. Many of us faced brief incarceration at that time. Were banned from Pickering Square, and one of our long-term founders and volunteers was pepper sprayed and thrown in jail. And so kind of through this experience, we've grown, and we've continued to be, we're the largest naloxone distributor in Bangor. We're one of the largest ones in the state. We're one of the largest syringe exchange programs in the state, and we don't have any funding. And we're all volunteer driven. I say any funding, we have a little bit of funding. We're working on it. We get some small grants. But we've remained uncertified. We haven't changed that much in terms of our attitudes and philosophies around civil disobedience, but the legal landscape has caught up to us. These kind of policies, especially like if you're talking about like during the AIDS crisis and things like this, syringes were illegal. Like the syringe exchange programs were like illegal, period. In some states, they still are. It varies state to state. But it is through this civil disobedience and kind of pushing the boundaries of these established kind of laws that public policy then gets it advanced. Because if you have a group of people who are committed to violating an unjust law, eventually they get tired of arresting and brutalizing you and making themselves look really, really bad. So our organization at this time, we're in a restructuring period, and we're trying to build the infrastructure within our organization that would allow us to have staff and to sustain our operations and receive compensation, because we experience a lot of trauma and spiritual burnout, literal burnout as a result of the work, especially when we're all just doing it in our spare time in addition to working full-time jobs. But we still continue to do outreach every Saturday. Mostly right now we're focused on going to the homeless encampments in Bangor, of which there are many. So we do trainings related to safer drug use, we do syringe distribution. We don't do exchange, we just give people what they need. We do drug checking, which is, being able to identify whether there's fentanyl present in a drug that you don't want fentanyl in. And kind of accidentally and unintentionally, we ended up becoming like de facto case managers and nurses in many cases, because it's not just one issue of when it comes to things like overdose, or it's houselessness, it's mental health, it's so many interconnected issues. And when during the service, it was really interesting. Don't know why I didn't know this, but this place is called the Sanctuary. So we're called Needlepoint Sanctuary. So there's another sanctuary 2 floors below us in the basement. And if any of you were confused about what was going on down there, that's us in the basement.
Yeah, so for about the last year or so, we have, as a congregation, kind of offered space up for Needlepoint to be able to store some of the supplies that they take out when they go out to the homeless encampments. And we've got it all kept under lock and key and everything like that, but it's a staging area to help Needlepoint be able to engage in their work in the community. So it's one way that we're able to help. And are there some other ways that people might be able to get involved or help?
Is this working? Okay. I put a bunch of flyers over there, so it's got information relating to, it's got our email, our phone number. We do free naloxone trainings, so if anyone wants to learn how to use naloxone, feel free to talk to me after this and or reach out or email us. We've also got a Patreon account, which is like a monthly subscription service where people can give like $5, a cup of coffee a month to support our work. We stretch our dollars very well. Very little funding. We've been able to do a lot. And you can follow us on social media. It's just Needlepoint Sanctuary of Maine. If you Google it, we'll pop up. And also, anyone who is interested in volunteering with us can also join us for outreach. You have to go through a little bit of basic training at first. How to use naloxone, just kind of some ins and outs of the reality of some of the street outreach that we do and things like that. But many hands make light work.
So, Will, I had the privilege of going with you this fall one time out to your outreach work and getting a chance to experience it. And I know when I first started learning more about harm reduction work that is going on and starting to gain some a little bit more, I hate to say popularity, but it's evidence-based work that cities like Ottawa and Vancouver, and I think Massachusetts just passed a law to do some of these kinds of things. But in the reading we had earlier, there was this conversation about, is this, are we helping people? How are we helping people? Are we enabling people? How do you balance that out? Because it feels a little uncomfortable when you think about this. And what I'm learning more and more, I've got a little bit different take, but we have been kind of taught to think about drug addiction in a particular way. And can you share a little bit about maybe a different perspective on?
I'm happy to elaborate on that, and that's something I encounter all the time, and it used to really it'd be very frustrating. It's like what Riviera was sharing. She's out doing work in the community. She's probably not getting paid that much. She's a social worker, and you've got people yelling at you. Like we've had people yell at us things like "let them die," or people come up to us and accuse us of killing people. The reality is that drug users, and as a result, because of how closely connected we are with that community, are really easy scapegoats for the issues in our society, right? Powerless, viewed as dirty and lesser, criminalized, forced into situations where they might, do things that people frown upon. So the concept of enabling is what it is it's this myth that's like deeply ingrained into us as Americans and through the war on drugs that drugs are evil and that anyone that does them, there must be something wrong with them. And that's not entirely off. A lot of people turn to drugs because they're suffering in some way or another, or they're trying to cope, or everyone's got their own story. And whenever I hear it as someone who was, a pretty enthusiastic drug user for many years, it's like, if you're thirsty and you want to drink water, is a cup being around enabling you to do so? I don't know. You'll probably just use your hands or stick your mouth under the faucet. People are going to use drugs regardless of whether or not they have access to these safe supplies. So what happens is that people will reuse the same syringe. They'll share syringes. This leads to the spread of diseases like HIV and Hep C, which then further get spread out into the community in other ways. It leads to people isolating and using alone, which these days, very dangerous, especially if you're not a regular opiate user. It can be very dangerous to use alone. It makes people less likely to access help. It makes people less likely to not just help in relation to their substance use, but in relation to all sorts of other medical and emotional issues that might be going on. So like a definitive answer is no. So we're not enabling people. Yeah.
Mhm. And one of the things that we had in some of our conversations in preparing for this that was really an interesting thing is learning that a lot of the overdose administration of naloxone to reverse overdose and whatnot, that the vast majority of the administration of that comes from people who are using, as opposed to EMTs or police or doctors or nurses, which blew my mind, and at like a rate that is exponentially larger. Yeah, and so this is saving lives. This is saving lives in a really big way, that way too.
Hello. Okay. I'm glad that you pointed that out, because that actually goes to the whole crux of the whole thing, is that harm reduction was started by people who use drugs. It wasn't something that politicians or a lot of them were social workers who used drugs, but it didn't come from official public health departments. It came directly out of the active drug use community, in the same way that like the ACT UP movement came out of like the AIDS epidemic. No one was helping us, so we had to help each other, and it is evidence-based practice, and it's incredibly effective. And drug users, when given access to naloxone, do reverse overdoses at a much higher rate. It's like 70% of all overdoses are reversed by people who use drugs, which also shows that we are actually not even fully aware of how common overdoses are. Most of the ones that we find out about are people that we lost. Yeah, drug users are the beating heart of harm reduction. We take care of each other. And whether that's a current drug user or a former drug user, that's kind of the be-all, end-all. But the cops get all the funding.
So I think we're going to wrap up. I think we're kind of running on over time. But if anybody wants to stay and have a conversation, Will, are you willing to hang out after the service and chat with people?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll stick around for coffee.
Okay, great. And so I'm just going to end by saying, the concept of harm reduction is still a concept that for many might feel uncomfortable or a little challenging, because it challenges some of our preconceived ideas of how we can best serve people who are struggling with addiction in our community. When I consider the evidence that is coming out of places like Ottawa, Vancouver, and Portugal, and many other states in our country, I believe that this idea of harm reduction is an important and necessary tool. I think it's one of the more viable tools that we have in addressing the idea of the rise of substance use disorder and addiction in our country, state, and city. I believe that it is humane, and it speaks deeply to our first Unitarian principle of honoring the inherent worth and dignity of each person and affirming each person's right to make their own decisions and to choose what they put in their bodies, and the right to individual conscience. So, really, thank you for coming and being brave and speaking your truth with us. We hope that we can continue supporting some of the work that you're doing here. Hard work and heartbreaking work, but very necessary. So thank you.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Joe. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. And I see there's a question. I just want to be mindful that we're running a little bit late. Would you be willing to wait until after the service, or you want to offer something? Okay. So the question is, are we taking donations here before you leave? And
Thank you for asking, because I'm terrible at asking for money. Yeah, absolutely. We can take checks, cash. We're a 501c organization, 501c3. So if you want it to be tax deductible, you can do that too. But we've got a cash app, all kinds of ways that we can donate. We really appreciate your support. Thank you.
thanks, Dick. Good question. All right. With that, I'm going to invite us all to rise in body or in spirit to sing our closing hymn, Filled with Loving Kindness. Third hand. As we extinguish our Unitarian Universalist chalice flame, symbol of faith, hope, love, and connection, let us be reminded that although our time of worship has come to an end, our time for service to each other and to the world has just begun. Blessed be. Just need to hold it there for a second. There you go. Wonderful. I now invite you to join in singing our benediction.